So here we are at the National Monument for Hartmannswillerkopf in the Vosges Mountains, and you can see here how strategic it was, because you have a view down over the Alsace plain. Below us is the National Monument, and up on top there is the summit, and we're about to walk up through the trenches. There was very fierce fighting here the first year of the war, up until beginning of January 1916, and there were substantial casualties, particularly in the last battle. 50% casualty rate on the French side in December 1915, and at that point both sides effectively agreed that it was a waste of time trying to do anything more, so the front stabilised. And this below the crypt, very moving cemetery overlooking the Alsace plain below. And although the front stabilised, clearly there was sporadic raids and shelling that went on through the course of the war. And these are the French memorial crosses, which are rather simpler than the British Commonwealth war graves. This one here says Louis de l'Homme Soldat of the 17 Battalion of BCA, died for France, 17th of February 1917. So now entering the French trench system, and you can see here the ground's just completely pockmarked. There are shell craters absolutely everywhere. French trenches didn't survive the ravages of time, largely because they were built mainly of wood and turf, whereas the Germans were much more robust, as we will see a bit later on. So this is Roche-sur-Mer, which, as you can obviously see, was a very strategic outpost. It was named after the commanding officer. I think it was a Captain Serme, who was shot in the neck and died in these very trenches down here. It was taken by the French in early 1915 and never retaken by the Germans. But what a stunning view. And this is a reconstruction exactly as it would have been during the First War. And this is underground protection here, but you can see probably not very strong with logs, timber over straightforward RSJs. And here, just a bit lower, a rather more robust trench system. You can see all the barbed wire remnants all the way along here. And see here at various points along the trench, machine gun posts, and if you look down through the hole there, you can see that covers the slope up. It's also covered as some degree of protection. And then a little bit further on, we have a dugout, which we're not allowed in here anyway, so you can't really see very much, but anyway, it clearly provided protection. This is here as a pretty good example of the typical barbed wire entanglements placed on the top of the trenches. And here a small protective dugout. and then areas up here where you've got rather more substantial protection rather than the typical wooden and corrugated iron supports. We're here in early September, day where it's very pleasant temperature. It's still a bit of thundery rain overhead, but to be up here in the middle of winter, and bearing in mind the Vosges, it's quite a popular ski area. We've given a pretty clear idea of how grim it must have been. It was under snow for several months. And this point here is the closest to the German front line. It's no man's land in here, and we're about to get to the German trenches, which are literally just over there, a matter of less than 50 metres away. And now we're in so-called no man's land, walking up here to the German trenches. It's not this one, I think it's still French. Here we're now, literally having walked a few yards, we're in the German trench system, which you can already see is definitely more robust here. Much stronger built with the concrete and little boxes in the wall. Don't know what they're for. As you can see, this is a whole different ball game. So periodically along the German trench would be this little dugout here, very reinforced roof, and they had the principle that in the event of shell fire, soldiers would have very short distance to get some reasonable cover. And here's another one just in there, sort of dugout. You can see here that, again, an example of how much better constructed the German trenches were. And this is Fortress Dora, and this is again obviously heavily reinforced. And you can see the machine gun slits there, ventilation port, and still very much intact. There's rather there's an informative diary entry here from a Captain Gustav Goes on the German side, and it says, seeing the enemy lines was a major problem during trench warfare. It was not possible to rise above the parapet, and the openings made in the trench firing positions only offered a restricted view on no man's land. The use of a retractable periscope was absolutely vital to enable surveillance of French front lines. We get to where the most advanced lookout posts are made through tunnels, either dug out like mines or cut into the rock. The sentry stands in a small concrete-lined hole. He's like a bear with his greatcoat and lined boots. To observe, he looks through a periscope or through the slit in the metal plate which protects his trench firing position. Through this he has a perfect view of the periscope and plate behind which one of the French mountain troops is standing facing him. Now here you see a good example of the construction techniques of the reinforcement used by the Germans. And then around here they referred to as the Russian sap. As you can see here, it says Gaulle Saint-Gothard Tunnel, which actually relates to the longest railway tunnel. But this obviously wasn't, but you can see how well reinforced it was, which it needed to be, because for example, in 3 days in December 1915, the French artillery fired 32,144 shells from 65mm mountain guns to 370mm howitzers, which is about 903 tons of shells, or one gun for every 13 metres of German front line on the summit, which is quite a lot of shell fire. So we've been staying overnight in the Hotel Panorama. Well, might as well have stayed here. Look at that. Just extraordinary view down over the Alsatian plain, all the way around back into the mountains here. And as we go into this tunnel system, which is the Alsace peak, this had to be blown out of the very hard rock, and you can see we have to take some shell to blast its way through this, and then we come through. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. Back out onto the other side. So this is really the heart of the German trench system, and it's on the summit. It's called Alsace, which is equally a commanding view as the French view we went past earlier on. So this striking bronze monument was created by Victor Antoine, who was a veteran of the French forces, built initially after the First War, and it was dynamited by the German forces in 1940, but then rebuilt again by Victor Antoine after the Second War. And you can see it here. It is looking down over the Alsace plain. And this area of the German line was effectively out of line of fire of the French shell fire, so hence why it stays largely intact. And here we're going into a dugout, and you can see still remaining all the paraphernalia that goes with keeping this in one piece. And here we see the remnants of the téléphérique, which was basically how the resupply was brought up from the Alsace plain below, ammunition, food, a lot. This is one of the many kitchens along the lower slopes, the German lines. It's a very strong structure. And that would go back into more bunkhouses under there. We're seeing out here on the slopes of Hartmannswillerkopf all this fantastic forest, but this would have just been completely barren, just shell holes and stumps and mangled bodies mostly. So this massive memorial cross here on the summit of Hartmannswillerkopf. It was built up in 1936 as a memorial to French and German soldiers who died, and the symbol of peace. And this is we're coming back down towards the centre now, and this is the Silberloch National Cemetery, which contains the graves of 1,640 French soldiers in 1,256 individual graves and 6 ossuaries with 384 unknown soldiers. German bodies were mostly repatriated.